So I was waiting to do the active perk guide video for y'all until I had acquired all of the active perks at their maximum level. I finally got all of the perks done. I've previously done a video on the passive perk tree, so if you're interested in that, just go ahead and watch that video. For a short synopsis, I generally run the same build for every character, so if you notice, all of my other characters are going to have the same build on them. What we're going to do, though, is we're going to explain the active perks. So this video will be a tad bit shorter than the passive perk, mainly because there are less active perks in the game. There are 5 active perks in the game, and you can only run 2. Now, let's first start that you should divide active perks into 3 categories. You should first look at that you're only going to have 1 active perk on a dwarf until you promote them. So if you're just casually playing the game, you want to put the most essential perk to you on right away, because for the long term, you're probably not going to get that extra perk slot unless you commit a decent amount of time to this game. For example, for me to promote each of my dwarves took me approximately 6 to 8 hours of gameplay per dwarf. So unless you're willing to commit a good 40 hours, you're not going to get the extra perk for each one. The easiest way to divide the 3 perks are into perks that are fun to use, perks that are essential to use, and perks that have some room for variation. Now, unlike in the passive tree, all of these perks do have a use. How you view them is going to be entirely up to you. So let's put these perks in order. In my opinion, the worst perk is hover boots. Now, hover boots is one of those things that a lot of players, particularly scout players, like to run. I'm not going to detract. For one thing, every class kind of suffers from this outside of the scout and maybe the engineer. The way it works is you have to long press the mule button while airborne. This can be very difficult to do when falling. So most people tend to use hover boots is they tend to use it as a way to avoid fall damage that would kill them by waiting until they get closer to the ground and then activating it to stop your momentum and stop you from dying. This can be helpful. For the people who say, oh, you can use the fire damage to burn the feet, that's a very risky play at that, and it's inconsistent, so I'm not counting it for that. You're mostly going to use it for fall damage or to get to a like a place, like if you're a scout and you're trying to grapple up to somewhere and you don't have a engineer to place platforms, you could hover in air for a few seconds. The downside is it does have a 75-second cooldown. So if you're trying, let's say, to get an alien egg out, right, that's on the roof, you don't have an engineer, so you grapple up and you hover, you get the egg, you're not going to be able to do that again for another 75 seconds. That may not seem like a large amount of time. That's a minute 15. You know, a swarm will definitely last longer than that. But it's not particularly helpful in my opinion, besides just teamwork. And in a situation like that, I mean, if you're playing with a driller, you can just drill through the side of the wall. If you're playing with a gunner, they can shoot a zip line up. If you got to do something like that, you can play around it. If you're by yourself, shit, sorry. If you're by yourself, Sembosca. So the next perk, in my opinion, that I would not recommend is Berserker. So Berserker is an active perk that it can only be activated when your power attack is on recharge. Essentially, you repress the power attack button while your power attack is on recharge. You get a Berserk mode for 10 seconds where you get boosted melee damage. I believe it's 33% or 50%, I'm not sure. And lightning fast pickaxe recharge for 10 seconds. It has a 4-minute cooldown. Essentially, you're going to use this if you need to use your power attack more often. That melee damage is not that big of a bonus. Really, what you're going to do is essentially, because it can last for 10 seconds, but remember that your power attack takes about 2 seconds to work. So you're really only going to get 4. Maybe if you can squeeze out all 5 power attacks in, you can get it. But most things that you're going to hit with a power attack are going to die in 1 or 2 power attacks. So you're not going to need that. If you're completely out of ammo, this can be helpful, but it doesn't last long enough to be effective in that situation. There's another perk we're going to talk about that I would recommend over this. So this is another perk I would never run. The situation is not very good for it. If it lasted maybe 15 seconds, I could understand that, and it gave a much bigger melee damage, I could understand that. So the next perk that I would also never run is Shield Link. This is the last of the perks that I personally wouldn't run for the active perk slots. And this is whenever it has a passive and an active. So for the active, whenever you are within 4 meters of an ally, press the reload button and it will overcharge their shield to 300% for 30 seconds. So without the bonus shield upgrade, that would essentially give them a 75 health shield. With the shield on, it's going to give them a 90 shield. Alright? Now, the reason I mention that is because your shield on higher difficulties is going to get shredded first. Not worth it. Do not recommend. The passive bonus is the main reason why I would run this. This is whenever you are within 4 meters of a teammate, both of your shields recharge 50% faster. So what this does is this applies the boosted converter at 150% instead of 200%, but without that regeneration delay. Now, if you are running boosted converter on top of this, it's going to be 250% at 9 seconds, which is nice, but again, I wouldn't recommend that. If you're running improved generator, this can be helpful, but if you're trying to make like a full shield build with improved generator, overcharger, one of the shield break mods, and then shield link, it could be alright. Now, it does have a 2-minute cooldown, which means you can use it fairly frequently in combat. The downside is how close you have to be to a teammate in order to use this effect. You're not going to be able to use this across the map. In my opinion, it would be better if this was tied to your laser pointer. So if you held L1, aimed at an ally, and pressed square while looking at them, and it would apply the shield bonus to them, where you could shoot somebody a shield, then I would recommend running this. In its current state, I don't. The only reason you're going to run this is for the passive regen. I see a lot of people that run Shield Link just so their shields recharge faster, and while it is helpful, the other perks are just more impactful. So those, in my opinion, are the bottom 3 perks. For the second tier of perks, these are the perks I would consider running as a secondary option if you have another perk that you want to go into. These perks are not that game-breaking. They're not that challenging. They don't, like, save you in certain situations, but they are helpful or fun to play around. So, at the bottom of this set is going to be See You in Hell. Now, See You in Hell, in my opinion, is actually a much better perk than I'm going to give it credit for at the 6th spot. And the only reason why I have it at 6 is because it's kind of just a poor man's version of another perk. So, and that being Iron Will. Now, it does a lot. First off, it has a 1-minute cooldown, which is pretty easy to get off. The second time is that it has more uses to it than some of the other perks, because you can use it 3 times a mission, plus it has a passive bonus. Basically, the passive bonus is that right after an enemy hits you, you get with a melee attack, you get a temporary melee damage bonus. So, if you're in a swarm and somebody hits you, you can hit him back for more damage. So, 2 things to note about this. 1, this does have a passive cooldown on it that resets. So, what do I mean by that? If an enemy hits you, you get that temporary melee bonus. But if an enemy hits you again, it doesn't stack, it resets it. But it also has a faint cooldown on it, which means you not only can you not stack them, it is going to go away if you don't hit somebody with it. If you hit somebody with it, it's nice. It does work on all melee damage. I should mention that. It's going to work with drills, it's going to work with throwing axes, it's going to work with the pickaxe. So, as a driller, you might be tempted to run this for bonus melee. I really don't think you need it. One could say, well, maybe I can just run a cryo cannon, freeze them faster, then, you know, It works on an enemy. It doesn't work on an enemy that hits you either. It works on any enemy. So if any enemy melee hits you, you get that temporary melee damage bonus on any enemy that you hit. Doesn't have to be the specific one. To be honest, it's not great because on higher difficulties, if you think, well, I'm out of ammo, I'm just going to pickaxe my way through this horde, you're going to die. Enemies hit too fast, they hit harder, they move faster, and they hit faster. So they're going to do more damage to you than you can to them. And power attack doesn't get that big of a bonus on it. The main reason you would run this for the active ability, basically what happens is 3 times per mission whenever you go down and you're waiting for a revive, you can press the button, it will trigger a large neuropulse explosion. What this does is it deals 666 damage to all enemies in that radius, which is basically enough to kill anything. And it will scare off enemies. So it lays an electric field for a short duration that enemies won't cross. This is a very good way of creating a safe space for your team to come in and res you really quickly if they're not running something like field medic that we're going to discuss later. So this can work effectively for an aggro tank build, for a gunner or a driller who wants to be up close and personal. They want to brawl, and if they go down, they can kind of just press a predator nuke button on their arm and blow everything up. For a second perk slot, this is a decent choice. You can pair See You in Hell quite well with other perks like Iron Will, where you can nuke everything around you and then get back up and go get a teammate up. It works well for field medics. If you go down, you can pop this so that everybody else can res you. And if they go down, they can pop theirs so you can go in and res them faster. And that, to me, is about the only 2 perks that it has good synergy with in See You in Hell. That's what I would run. If you're going to run something else, I would either recommend Dash for survivability or Heightened Sensitive for survivability. While it can be a fun perk to run, there is a big drawback to this, is that it really only works if you go down to enemies and not fall damage. If you die to fall damage, now you're in trouble because now you pretty much just wasted See You in Hell unless you could attract enemies to you. It does have a 1-minute cooldown as well, so in situations where you're just going down back to back to back, like you're going down like 20-second intervals, you're not going to get value out of this. That being said, it is a nice helpful perk. The next perk that I want to cover is Beastmaster. Beastmaster is a fun perk to run. Essentially what it does is when you are looking at a Glyphid Grunt, any Glyphid Grunt, as long as it's just a Glyphid Grunt, you can hold square at 2 meters, and it will charm them, and so you will have a Steve. He will follow you around. Now, you can have a full team of 4 running this, and having 4 Glyphid Grunts running around, and it's insane. There are a couple issues with it. So the first issue I want to talk about is that there is no reliable indicator on your screen to let you know what your health bar actually is for the Glyphid Grunt. You have to look at the Glyphid Grunt in order to do it. Second off, they're not going to deal with airborne enemies at all. The AI programming, they do not worry about Macteras or Nemesites, anything like that. If it's in the air, fuck it, it's not getting hit, that's on you. They're good for fighting and tanking other grunts, though. They're good for clearing out grunts, swarmers, they can fight Praetorians. But the big issue that you have with this is that it's very difficult to see if you still have your Steve, and if you don't have your Steve, how long on the cooldown. It's very small in your corner. What I would recommend to fix that is just when you charm a Glyphid Grunt, you could put an actual health bar next to the rest of the dwarves on your team to let you know, hey, we have a Steve available. Or this is what Steve is at. Another indicator as well is that health bar is very difficult to see for new players because it's just a blue shine, and above their head it will say Steve. If that was slightly more pronounced, or if that blue color was a different color, maybe if it was bright green, I would appreciate the bright green outline more to indicate friendly. Now, the perks of this is that if you're a solo player, you essentially get 2 minions now. You get Bosco and you get a Steve. And you can charm different types of Steve. You can charge grunts and slashers. So you can get a slasher, which is a bit more fragile but hits harder, or a grunt, which is a lot tanky, or a guard, which is a lot tankier. It does not work against anything that's not a Glyphid grunt, and it doesn't work against Ebonite mutation or Kurosite mutation grunts. So don't think that that's going to save you. The grunts also deal 300% more damage, which is a lot. This does stack with difficulties. So on Has 4 or 5, you will get 300% bonus damage based off of the damage they deal on Has 4 or Has 5. Here's the downside. On Has 4 or Has 5, you want survivability perks, and that's not this. This is a fun perk to run, but you're going to need something that helps out your survivability or your team. Or I would make it to give you the ability where a Glyphid Grunt could revive you once per mission as well. Would be a nice active bonus as well. I would like to see another version of Beastmaster potentially to where you could charm, say, a Glyphid Praetorian to your side at the cost of they have like 50% of their health as normal, or you could only charm one Praetorian once per mission. That would be an interesting idea for me personally. I don't see them granting that, but that is an ability I'd like. Personally, for synergy on this, you're going to want to run something for survivability like Iron Will, Field Medic, Heightened Senses. Those are the three we're going to be talking about later. For the other perk slot, we have Dash. Now, most people swear by Dash because it lets you get through missions faster. Essentially, it's a 25-second cooldown, and the way it works is you just get a burst of speed. While you're moving, press L3 quickly while sprinting, so basically double sprint, and you get a short dash. And you ignore all slowdown effects. Doesn't cancel them. So once dash ends, you'll get back to it. Here's the thing. I really just don't find myself using that often. I use my traversal tools in the environment, maybe a little bit more than I should. Very good for scout players who are looking to dash around the map. Very good for like clearing things very quickly and speedrunning. But most of the time when I'm doing a mission, I am looking for resources along the way. I am looking for enemies to kill for more experience. I'm not trying to blow through the mission as quickly as possible, and if I am, then I'm not going to run this. The main reason I would run this is the slowdown. Now, the entire rest of the community swears that this is like the single best perk in the game, and I can't discredit them on that. It is a good perk. It may not be the best perk in my opinion. It's not my playstyle to dash through, but if you are looking for survivability, this is very situations. Enemies that have slowdowns can lock you into very difficult swarms to get out of because you're going to be slowed, and if you can't fight your way out of that swarm, you've got to run out. This is going to let you get out of there very quickly. It's also good for certain maps and biomes in particular where you need to move through quickly or that they have slowdown effects in place. For example, this is good for glacial strata and fungus bog slowdowns, and it can also be good for hollow ball if you're trying to avoid stabber vines. If you time this right, you can dash through a set of stabber vines before they can hit you. The downside, in my opinion, is that this perk does not actively do anything to improve your survivability. And that's where we're going to talk about the last three. Now, these three, in my opinion, are going to be the crutch perks that you are going to run the most. So for this, we're going to go in order from top to bottom. We're going to go 1, 2, 3. Heightened Senses, in my opinion, is kind of a crutch perk. It's one of those perks that once you run it, you can't stop running it. What it does is it gives you a passive bonus where it lets you know when something's about to grab you. This doesn't affect a lot of enemies in the game, but it does affect the most annoying enemies in the game and the ones that can end your runs. That would be the Cave Leech, Mactera Grabber, and the Troller. So the main reason you're going to run this perk is because 2 times per mission, you can hold X to kill what grabbed you and escape it. That being Cave Leeches, Trollers, Grabbers. Now, Mactera Grabbers aren't particularly dangerous. Your teammate can shoot you free in any of these situations. I wouldn't worry about it with Mactera Grabbers. They're not the end of the world. They don't damage you, but they will fly you around. You can't do anything, and then they'll drop you, and that's where you'll take damage. They're also a lot easier to hear and call out. This is a very good perk to run for new players, or for people who are playing with randos, because you will see an entire team of people. Somebody gets grabbed by a cave leech, they call out for their team, they drop down to the ground, teammate runs in, they go to res you, get grabbed by the cave leech, call out for help, get dropped down to the bottom. Another person comes in, sees the 2 dead bodies on the floor, doesn't look up at the ceiling, goes to res somebody, gets grabbed, and you could have an entire team wipe because nobody looks up. This can put an end to that bullshit pretty quickly. I run this as a crutch perk. If I were to take this out, I could probably get a lot more value out of my 2 perk slots. As a newer player, this is what I would recommend running because Field Medic's really only good if you have a team, like a full team. And Iron Will is really good when you know how the game works and you know how to use it. So our number 2 perk is going to be Field Medic. What Field Medic does is Field Medic gives you a passive 30% revive bonus. And when you revive somebody, any nearby enemies flee. So with any enemies that are, basically adds the fear effect to you once you have successfully revived somebody to give you some breathing space. This is helpful if you are not running the mod on your armor suit for the additional 3-second revive invulnerability. As a passive, this is pretty solid, just reviving faster. Not helpful in all situations, but it doesn't matter how your teammate goes down, which is something comparable compared to See You in Hell. It also has the other bonus where once per mission, you get an insta revive. Start reviving somebody, press a button, boom, they're up. I would prefer that this get changed. I would prefer that instead of having the bonus revive speed, I think they could leave the bonus revive speed at, say, 10, 15, or 20%. Okay, nerf that. Give me more instant revives. Say, 1 for each dwarf. So you level the perk up 3 times, you get, 1, 2, 3 revives. Probably overpowered, though. The main reason why you want to run this perk is for that instant revive. Because there are a lot of fights where you're last man standing, you're low on health, just revive somebody, get them up immediately. They're full shield, they're half health, they're good to go. This is one of the most essential perks for team play, and even though I'm mostly a solo player, you notice I still run it because I don't like to change my builds around all that much. The last perk that we're going to cover is Iron Will. Now, Iron Will can straight up save doomed missions. Let's just talk about this. If you go down, you hold X, you get yourself back up. You get 12 seconds. You get 50% slowdown resistance. You get, I believe it's 15, I forget if it's 15 or 20% movement speed. You get a damage bonus of 10%. All of your weapons are reloaded. And you cannot take damage for 12 seconds. However, after that 12 seconds, if you have not gotten any health, you will go back down again. So what is this perk good for? This perk is good for in a situation where your team is dying and you're down and the last person is about to go down. You get yourself back up and you get somebody else back up. Now, this goes very well on the Driller. Everybody talks about this is great on Driller because you can run the Vampire passive perk or you can run Resupplier, okay? And you can either run over to a resupply and heal, so you get yourself back up, basically. Or you can just start killing enemies with Vampire and keep yourself back up. But that's not where the main value is. The main value is not in getting yourself up, believe it or not. The main value is getting yourself up and then getting somebody else up. Because you're going to go down if you get yourself back up and don't get health. Let's say somebody had to take the last resupply. Let's say you're in a Mactera swarm, so you don't have enemies in melee range. Let's say you're not running throwing axes with your Vampire perk. Let's say, enemies are far away. This is good for getting you back up, so you can run over to a teammate, get them back up, and then if you go down, they can get you up. This is also good for if everybody on the team goes down, you can pop this so that you can get back up again. For solo players, it's not great because you have Bosco, although it basically acts like giving you a last perk. If you are a solo player, I'm going to run Heightened Senses and then something fun, like maybe See You in Hell or Beastmaster. Beastmaster is what I would recommend if you were doing that. But, in short, you're going to have your clutch perks, which are Heightened Senses, Field Medic, and Iron Will that can save you a run. You're going to have your helpful perks that can be fun to play around, like See You in Hell, Dash, Beastmaster, and then you have the other 3 that are very niche. They have a limited use, like Berserker, Shield Link, or Hover Boots. So, it's ultimately up to you which one of these you choose to run. I hope this video has been